Main event of the evening.
These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today, we'll be discussing Season 4, Episode 12, Fonzie's Old Lady.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Fonzie's Old Lady.
We open with Fonzie arriving at Arnold's. He tells Al a woman will be coming by later looking for Fonzie.
They're all looking for you.
No. This ain't a Fonzie chick, right?
Not one of his usual girls, a little old lady whose car Fonzie fixed, so Al can let her know Fonzie is here when she arrives. Fonzie joins Richie, Potsy, and Ralph at their table, just as the three of them are about to go see a college recruiting film for the University of Hawaii. Fonzie's not particularly interested, so they leave without him. A woman who is definitely not a little old lady arrives. She bumps into Al, and after she compliments the smell of his cooking, asks for Fonzie. Al escorts her to his table, then jokes to Fonzie about the little old lady. Fonzie explains to her he was waiting for the little old lady who dropped off the car. The woman explains it was her Aunt Grace, and introduces herself as Adriana Prescott. She sits down with him and ruminates on her day.
First my car breaks down, then my tennis racket splits.
No kidding.
No kidding, and then my poodle gets a ticket in the park.
She asks Fonzie if he's ever had a day like that, and he says his poodle hates the park, but loves the opera. Adriana laughs. Al comes out with a serving of his cooking for Adriana, who loves it. A little later, Adriana and Fonzie are having a discussion about Adriana's father, who had a car in the Indianapolis 500 in 1950. As Fonzie feeds her bites on a fork, Fonzie accidentally snaps his fingers and summons a group of girls, who he sends away. Adriana is impressed by Fonzie's trick, though he identifies it as a gift. Adriana calls him fascinating, and asks him to tell her more about himself. He says there's not much to tell. He's the best mechanic in a large Midwestern city. She asks if he has any other interests. He A's at her. She gets up to go and thanks him for fixing her car. He tells her to let him know if her car has any more problems, and he'll give it the magic touch. She invites him to stop by her tennis club, and he says he will, claiming to play like a pro. They decide on tomorrow afternoon. She leaves, and Fonzie hits the wall in frustration, accidentally turning a light off. At the Cunningham house the next day, Marion is assuring Fonzie everything will be alright as she, Fonzie, and Joni move the couch, since Richie will be going to the club with him. Marion takes out a racket so she can teach Fonzie the basics of tennis, and assures the nervous Fonzie the best way to learn something is to do it.
Mrs. C, I learned some of my best stuff that way.
Richie comes downstairs, and Marion hands him and Joni a fly swatter and a spatula so the four of them can help Fonzie practice.
I can't play with this. I can't play with a fly swatter. I'm better with a spatula.
They play a very strange version of tennis with an imaginary ball. When Howard gets home, he is understandably baffled. As Fonzie and Richie prepare to leave, Marion says she forgot to teach Fonzie about love, prompting a whoa from him. Howard explains it's a term of scoring.
Scoring, love. I think I'm gonna like this game.
As they leave, Richie tells Marion Fonzie is in big trouble if they use a real ball. At the tennis club, Richie and Fonzie enter the dining area after a game of tennis that left Fonzie exhausted. They're soon joined by Adriana and the couple they were playing against, the man nursing a bruise on his neck, courtesy of Fonzie.
I should have told you about that custom.
Yeah, I think you should, Red. When he was coming over that net, I thought he was on the attack.
The couple leave, and Adriana tells Richie they want to set Richie up with their daughter Millicent. Richie says he's not too good on blind dates. Right as an attractive girl passes by, and Adriana greets her as Millicent. Richie changes his mind, and goes after her, while singing Blueberry Hill. Adriana asks Fonzie if this was his first time playing tennis. Fonzie asks if she could tell, and she, clearly lying, says no. Incidentally, they lost the game. They sit down at the piano. Adriana has some training, and she plays a rendition of I Only Have Eyes for You, for Fonzie.
Are the stars out tonight?
Hey, you're good.
Someone leaves a tip for them, much to Adriana's annoyance. That night at the Cunningham house, Richie is trying to convince his dad he wants to go to the University of Hawaii for his terrific journalism program. Howard's not buying it.
He'll probably end up majoring in a terrific course of surfing.
You think I can make a living at it?
Also, they're drinking milk out of goblets for some reason.
Dilly dilly. Dilly dilly. Dilly dilly.
Fonzie enters. Howard says he heard Fonzie's tennis game went well, and Fonzie claims that just because Adriana is an older woman, Howard doesn't need to make such a big deal out of it. Richie says they weren't talking about him, they were talking about the University of Hawaii, but Fonzie is unconvinced. Howard says he and Fonzie ought to have a little talk. Fonzie says he doesn't care how old Adriana is, she's a groovy chick, period, end of convo. Howard's less worried about the age difference than the class disparity. Richie had told him that Fonzie decked a man at the club today. Fonzie insists he needed to find the club. Howard asks if Adriana could get along in Fonzie's world. Richie suggests Fonzie take Adriana to the spring dance at Arnold's. Fonzie says he will, just to show them, and tells them to stop talking about it. Then he leaves. Richie and Howard start looking at the University of Hawaii brochure, and Richie says the attractive lady in the grass skirt is the dean. At the spring dance, Richie, Potsy, Ralph, and the girl drummer are playing It's Late, as the assembled teens are dancing.
It's late. We gotta get on home. It's late. We've been gone too long.
Fonzie and Adriana show up as the band is taking a break, and Fonzie introduces his lady friend to them. Potsy says he already knows Adriana. She gets gas at his father's station. Adriana didn't know Mr. Weber had a son. Potsy says he doesn't tell anyone. Al comes out of the kitchen to castigate the band for not playing.
Listen, where's the music? You gotta keep them dancing and they get thirsty and Adriana.
And also to make Italian peppered small talk with Adriana before he goes back. The band is hesitant to play anything too new for Adriana, and suggests Clementine. She asks for something more hip, like Splish Splash. The band plays, and everyone dances. Afterwards, Adriana goes to powder her nose. Potsy takes Richie aside and reveals something devastating. Adriana's married.
Did you fall off your bicycle again?
Yeah, but that has nothing to do with it.
Potsy's father sends all the bills to a Mr. Prescott. Richie tells him not to say anything to Fonzie, then goes to sit with his best friend. Richie breaks the news that there's a Mr. Prescott who pays Adriana's gas bills. Could be your father, or could be your husband. Fonzie says he's never seen a ring on her finger, and that means she ain't married. Adriana rejoins them. Richie goes back to the band. Fonzie tells Adriana he feels like talking, and asks about Mr. Prescott. She confirms he's her husband, and he's alive, and they aren't divorced, but they are separated. Sort of.
No, my husband is 4,000 miles away trying to buy some oil field or something.
He doesn't tell, and she doesn't tell. She tells Fonzie not to let it bother him. Fonzie says he really likes Adriana, who is different from any other woman he's ever known.
For one, you don't giggle.
But Fonzie has some rules he lives by, and one of them is that he doesn't take what ain't his, especially wives. Adriana wants to talk about it more, but Fonzie doesn't. He's not judging Adriana, but he's got his rules. Adriana says she had a similar set of rules, but as she got older, she sort of bent them a little. Fonzie asks why Adriana didn't tell him she was married. She says he didn't ask. She thinks she's a little different. She thought Fonzie was a little different too. That's why she never thought it mattered. Fonzie says it matters. Adriana asks if Fonzie will still fix her car. He will.
Oh yeah, as long as Aunt Grace picks it up.
And they both say they're glad they met each other. Al comes out with veal cutlets for two, right as Adriana leaves. Fonzie sums everything up for Richie. Richie says he's sorry. Fonzie says not as sorry as he is, but you know what they say.
It is always darkest in the middle of the night.
He snaps his fingers and chooses a girl to dance with as the band plays on. The next day, the Cunninghams are home from a tennis game in which Howard and Marion soundly beat Richie and Joni.
We really beat you two.
Boy, did we skunk you guys, huh?
Fonzie claims he outclassed them all, despite not playing. He was up in the bleachers with Loretta, taking part in one of America's favorite pastimes. He leaves, and Howard and Marion express a desire to play more. The exhausted Joni and Richie go upstairs to pass out, and as soon as they're gone, Marion and Howard collapse on the couch, equally exhausted.
Thank you, Peter. That was Fonzie's Old Lady, which first aired back on January 4th, 1977. That night, Happy Days came back from hiatus and was the lead-in to a brand new Laverne and Shirley, in which the girls are accused of shoplifting and thrown in jail. On NBC, there was a new episode of Ba Ba Black Sheep in which James Darren guest starred as a movie star pilot, and on CBS, Tony Orlando and Dawn had been canceled during the hiatus. Aww. And replaced with a news magazine called Who's Who, featuring Dan Rather, Charles Kuralt, and Barbara Hauer. Premiere episode featured stories about conductor Leopold Stokowski, actor Richard Burton, and a 19-year-old railroad conductor. Fonzie's Old Lady was directed by Jerry Paris and was written by Marty Nadler, who had previously written Fonzie the Father, Fonzie the Flatfoot, and They Call It Potsy Love. Our guest star this week is Diana Hyland as Adriana Prescott. Diana was an Ohio-born actress who worked in television from the 1950s to the 1970s. She'd been a regular on Peyton Place and appeared on The Twilight Zone, Kojak, The Fugitive, and much more. Probably her most significant role was in the 1976 made-for-TV movie The Boy in the Plastic Bubble with John Travolta, in which she played Travolta's mother.
But how can we make a decision like that for another human being? I mean, what if... Oh, Johnny, do you think we could live with it?
She and Travolta became romantically involved after that film. Very unfortunately, however, Diana was diagnosed with breast cancer and died at the age of 41, less than 3 months after this episode aired. She had just been cast as the mother on ABC's 8 is Enough, but she only lived long enough to record 4 episodes. She died in Travolta's arms on March 27th, 1977. So, Peter, what did you think of Diana Hyland as Adriana Prescott?
I thought she was excellent. Despite the fact that she's this very wealthy woman, she feels very down to earth, and that makes her relationship with Fonzie feel a lot more believable than if she had been more flighty or ditzy or the like. She obviously wasn't written that way. Fonzie specifically says that she's different from any other woman he's known because she doesn't giggle. But at the same time, she really does give off this kind of sense of earthiness, and she feels very likable, which is part of why it's so surprising when it turns out that she was married and she didn't tell Fonzie, and she and her husband have this arrangement. But yeah, she and Fonzie had really good chemistry, and they made a pretty cute couple for this one episode.
I would agree. I think Diana Hyland gives an excellent performance as Adriana. I think it's a combination of how the character is written and how Diana performs her. This character could have been written as this rich, flighty, stereotype woman, and Diana turns her into a real person who is sympathetic and is very warm, very engaging, very likable. And she and Henry Winkler have excellent chemistry on screen. The strangest thing, and maybe this was just maybe my thought process, was that the one girlfriend of Fonzie's that Diana sort of reminded me of in a weird way was Pinky Tuscadero.
Oh.
And I'll tell you why. It's because Adriana Prescott carries herself with a lot of self-confidence. And Fonzie is normally surrounded by all these giggly, simpering, fawning girls all around him who do whatever he says and are sort of interchangeable. And yet Adriana is not like that at all. She's very much her own person, and she has all of this confidence, and so does Pinky. And when he said that you're the one girl who doesn't giggle, well, Pinky didn't giggle either.
Yeah.
You know, so she's not a giggly girl. She is a woman who is Fonzie's equal in coolness and power and confidence. And that's the thing that the girls at Arnold's can't usually supply to him. He likes those girls at Arnold's, but that's not really what he's into. He's really into somebody who's a little bit more her own person. And that's what Adriana is. So, yeah, I thought it was an excellent performance and a very well-written character. A lot of music in this episode. We have Personality by Lloyd Price, Mona Lisa by Nat King Cole. Of course, all the Nat King Cole songs are Ike Cole. We hear Put Your Head on My Shoulder by Paul Anka. Blueberry Hill is performed by Ron Howard.
I found my thrill.
And then it's performed by Henry Winkler.
Blueberry Hill.
I didn't think he ever sang that song, but he sings a little bit of it this week. The musical highlight of the week for me was I Only Have Eyes for You, performed by Diana Hyland. This was written by Harry Warren and Al Dubin for a 1934 film called Dames.
Are the stars out tonight? I don't know if it's cloudy or bright, 'cause I only have eyes for you, my dear. The moon may...
The Flamingos had a hit with it in 1959. It was one of my favorite songs of all time, and I was glad to have it performed here. And we hear It's Late, performed by Anson Williams. It was a big hit for Ricky Nelson in 1959.
It's late, we gotta get on home. It's late, we've been gone too long, too bad. We should have checked our time, can't phone. We done spent every dime.
I think Anson does a nice job with it. And of course, Splish Splash is performed by Anson Williams and then by Anson with Donnie Most.
I was rolling and a strolling, moving and a grooving, splish, splash, yeah.
I do like the harmonies on the reprise of the song. I thought that was kind of nice when Anson and Donnie are doing harmonies on the song. But that was a song that I've heard too much during the first few seasons of Happy Days. And
now hearing it gives you flashbacks.
Cultural and historical references for the week. The sign at Arnold's this week reads, Spring Dance, Friday Night Stag or Drag. The phrase stag or drag means you can come alone or you can bring a date. I never heard that expression before, stag or drag. Had you ever heard that?
I had not.
The University of Hawaii probably refers to the University of Hawaii at Manoa near Honolulu. The institution was founded in 1907, currently has about 17,000 students. It's a Division I school, and their nickname is the Rainbow Warriors. The U of H does have a journalism program. In 2018, it was ranked 81st in the nation. The University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee was only 92nd. So 81st is actually pretty darn respectable. The Indy 500, or the 34th International 500-mile sweepstakes, was held at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on May 30th, 1950. The winner that year was Johnny Parsons from Los Angeles. It was the only time that he ever won Indy, and his name was misspelled on the trophy.
Wah, wah, wah.
First of all, Johnny, this week in Indianapolis, they've been qualifying at 206, 207 miles an hour. When you were racing back in the late 40s, early 50s, what kind of speeds did it take to win the pole position in the Indy back then?
Well, the first time I competed there was in 1949. I had second fast time, and I qualified at 132 miles an hour.
There is a Valley Vista Tennis Club in Walnut Creek, California, in case you ever want to join. And Joni is reading the September 1st, 1958 issue of Esquire magazine. Though Esquire had a somewhat racy reputation, this particular issue was fairly tame. I actually read it online. You can read the September 1st, 1958 issue of Esquire online.
Oh, wow.
And it's very dry and very dull. Tennis is a big theme of this episode. In tennis, if the ball hits the line, it is considered just as good as hitting the space within that line. So on the line is fair. And supposedly the term love in tennis, meaning a score of 0, comes from the French term l'œuf, meaning the egg. This week, Arnold's features the poster for The Greatest Show on Earth. The Oscar-winning 1952 drama set in the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus is considered the worst movie ever to win Best Picture. And Potsy jokingly suggests playing Clementine. Oh My Darling Clementine is a Western folk ballad dating back to the 1880s. There are a few up-tempo rock and jazz versions, including one by Bobby Darin and another by Jan Dean.
In a cavern, in a canyon, excavating for a mine, lived a miner, 49er, and his offspring, Clementine.
So it would not be impossible to play at a setting such as this.
Plus, it's in terms of subject matter, it's basically a precursor to all the teenage death songs of the late 50s and early 60s, so...
Is she really going out with him?
Well, there she is. Let's ask her.
Betty, is that Jimmy's ring you're wearing?
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it wouldn't be that bad of a choice.
Which is probably why it did make actually a comeback in the 50s and 60s, so it's not that far out of line. Science says that it is not darkest just before dawn. Despite the popular saying, the brightness of the night sky depends on the appearance of the moon and the presence or absence of man-made lighting. I learned that this week, and of course...
Thanks to Happy Days.
Yes, I keep learning thanks to Happy Days. Other observations. So it's spring this week. Last time, I believe it was Christmas.
Yeah, so we just skipped January and February entirely.
And spoiler alert, it's winter again next week. So
okay, so I guess this episode was just out of order.
I guess so. Okay, here's a talking point. The Aloha Pussycats are not going away, apparently. Maybe it's time that they did?
I mean, there is kind of a weird exotification of Hawaii that's going on because of the Pussycats. And granted, that's been happening with or without them, but, like, it's a little uncomfortable, and they've kind of worn out their welcome.
That's what I was thinking, that the Aloha Pussycats and the Pulaski twins need to be retired for a while at least. Was I alone in thinking that Al wanted to pursue Adriana for himself?
You are not. You are not.
So there definitely was something there between Al and Adriana. And in fact, when I first watched the episode, that's where I thought this was going.
It was going to turn into a Fonzie-Al love triangle?
Yes, that is the episode that I had envisioned, yes. And I thought, wow, wouldn't that be kind of interesting? Al and Fonzie competing for the same woman. But no, the episode went in a very different direction. I desperately want to know more about the drummer in Richie's band.
Yes.
She is now definitely a recurring character. What is she talking about with Potsy back there, for instance, when Fonzie and Adriana are breaking up in the foreground? I want to know more about her. I did some research this week into the career of that actress, Hilary Horan, who is on a lot of episodes of Happy Days. And I found an incredible episode of Facts of Life that she starred in called Dope.
Hi, Mrs. Garrett. Are you sure we can't lure you over to our dorm?
Really? We could use some young blood over there.
And she is the leader of a group of girls called The Group. And to be in the group, you have to smoke dope. And it's crazy. It's online. It's easy to find. Go watch it. I would assume that when the band plays at Arnold's, that the singing is live, but the backing music is all pre-recorded. So by the end of Splish Splash, Anson Williams is wildly out of sync with the band. Like, he's not even close.
I was moving and a grooving, yeah. I was splishing and a splashing. I was a rolling and a strolling, moving and a grooving, splish, splash.
something must have gone wrong there. He actually manages to finish sort of on time, but other than that, he's way wrong. And then the final discussion between Fonzie and Adriana is surprisingly nuanced, with both characters emerging as sympathetic and rational and kind to each other. It might have been tempting to turn Adriana into a villain or to have Fonzie freak out, and neither of those things happens. I really wanted to give the show credit for writing a more subtle and nuanced scene. I don't know, what did you think?
I think you're absolutely right. Adriana is definitely in the wrong because she didn't tell Fonzie she was married, and that's kind of a big deal. But at the same time, you absolutely get where she's coming from because she just didn't think it mattered. And Fonzie, like he says, he doesn't judge her. He doesn't think that she and her husband are wrong to have their little arrangement. He just has certain rules, and he's going to stick to those rules.
Absolutely. This was a conversation where I came away respecting both people. And you have to feel for Adriana a little bit here. I mean, she and her husband are separated by thousands of miles, and he may be a businessman who's away for a lot of the year, who's maybe out of her life for a long time. And is she just supposed to go without physical affection or closeness with some other person? I don't know. Probably because she's married. It's a subtle issue, and the episode absolutely does not treat it as a black and white thing. She has an arrangement with her husband, but Fonzie has rules that he lives his life by. They both emerge as sane, responsible people in this conversation, and I really like that. So, Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions this week?
At the tennis club, Fonzie's tennis outfit consists of his usual jacket and a white shirt and a pair of white shorts that, as soon as he shows up wearing them, the studio audience goes wild.
Okay, Fonz, we can eat in here.
Why didn't you tell me that you get so tired playing this game? Man, how come I do all the running?
It is quite a moment seeing him.
The first time we ever saw Henry Winkler's knees.
It was well worth the wait. Yeah, it's a great moment. And I like that he wears the leather jacket over his tennis outfit. So did you have any other observations that you wanted to make about Fonzie's old lady?
We again have another kind of disturbing indication of where Potsy's relationship with his father is going, because now we find out that Potsy's father apparently just doesn't like to tell people he has a son.
Hi, I didn't know Mr. Weber had a son.
He doesn't tell anyone.
So, does he keep Potsy tied up in his house, like Mr. Rochester and his wife?
I would have to wonder about what Potsy's life is like at the Weber house. We have never gone over there. We actually went over to Ralph Malph's house one week, but we never go over to the Webers.
Considering everything we slowly start to find out about the Webers, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, it might be too disturbing for a sitcom like Happy Days. So, Peter, I will ask that age-old, timeless question. Was this episode any good?
Yes, it was. This isn't really a barrel of laughs kind of episode, although there are some very funny moments. But I think it's a very good character study of Fonzie. I think his relationship with Adriana I think it's very well done. I think it shows a slightly different side to Fonzie. And I found their relationship to be surprisingly believable. And at the same time, their breakup was also pretty believable because they do come from very different backgrounds. And while it is possible to have a relationship in spite of that, they ultimately can't make it work, in large part because Adriana is married and just didn't think that was worth mentioning.
I would agree. This is actually one of the more grown-up episodes of Happy Days that we've had, and it is not a barrel of laughs, even though there is some fun at the tennis club especially, and all the tennis hijinks at the Cunningham house are also kind of funny. But this is a slightly more melancholy episode about two people who really do get along well together and make a great couple, but there are reasons why they can't be together. I was glad to see Happy Days exploring a relationship like that. Sometimes it feels like Happy Days needs to force those happy endings onto every single episode because this is the show called Happy Days. And this week, I thought they did pretty well about not making it seem as forced as they did in Fonzie Loves Pinky Part 3. I think the resolution was pretty much the same, is that Fonzie's just going to go back to his womanizing ways and having 20 girlfriends who don't mean anything to him.
And it's all very sad, much sadder than I think the showrunners intended.
That's a note that Happy Days rarely hits, and then they did this week. And then when they added the tag about the tennis game, which is all just pure goofery.
I can't believe how you messed up my game.
Well, you should have stayed on your side of the court. What do you think those white lines are for? Parking spaces?
It didn't feel as forced because then there was a commercial break and now you're in a different location, and so they can do a happy scene to end the episode. And I thought that was much better than trying to work a goofy conversation in the same scene where Fonzie has just broken up with his fiancée, and then he and Richie have a dumb conversation and then get on a motorcycle. That's my least favorite Happy Days ending of all time, if you can't tell, is the ending of Fonzie Loves Pinky Part 3. But yeah, I thought this was something different for Happy Days, and I think they really did a great job with it. And so this was very much a change of pace, and I enjoyed it. So, Peter, can you tell the audience how they can keep up with us and find out about all the things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Sphericals. That's Sfericals.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week is another episode where the title tells you exactly what happens in it. There's a time capsule in the episode called Time Capsule.
Well, that sounds like a fun one. I, for one, am looking forward to it. So see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
My love must be a kind of blind love. I can't see anyone but you. Are the stars out tonight? I don't know if it's cloudy or bright. I only have eyes for you.
Blueberry Hill.